let's talk about Scooby-Doo, because I really, really like Scooby-Doo. It's a franchise that, despite dips in quality and decades of change, has managed to stay relevant and fun for more than 50 years now. It's had a fucking bazillion television shows, and they themselves have vastly varied in quality, but we've also gotten dozens upon dozens of films, we've gotten a line of comics, we've gotten video games, we've gotten multiple board games. Scooby-Doo is fucking everywhere, and I love Scooby-Doo. But earlier this year, Scoob came out, and to be honest, it really hurt my soul. While I would argue there have been much worse Scooby-Doo films, such as the Arabian Nights Scooby-Doo film, and the 3 prequel live-action films that were made off the success of the iconic duology, Scoob was so poorly conceived and heartless that it actively made me lose hope for the franchise for quite a few weeks. I eventually brought myself back from the chasm of anguish and watched some actually good Scooby-Doo, but there has been a strong sense of dread every day waiting for this film, just because of how much Scoob fucking hurt me. Also, the Scooby-Doo crossover films are pretty hit or miss. I really enjoyed the Batman one that came out about 2 years ago and the Kiss one that came out a little bit ago. But the WWE ones are both very bad. Adding to that is the fact that this movie has multiple crossovers in it. It has Scarecrow from DC, it has Elvira, and it has Bill Nye. So I was pretty worried. Overall, the good news, I ended up enjoying this movie quite a decent amount, and I can definitely recommend this to Scooby-Doo fans. I will say before anything else that there are ties in this movie to some of the previous entries in the 2D animated film canon that is currently being attempted by the Scooby-Doo crew. I don't think viewing those films is needed to enjoy this movie, but it may give you a small bit of extra satisfaction. Those movies specifically are Curse of the 13th Ghost and Return to Zombie Island. Of course, the predicament arises that both of those films are sequels of sorts, with Curse of the 13th Ghost being a long-awaited ending to a franchise or a series that started in 1985, and Return to Zombie Island being a sequel to the greatest Scooby-Doo movie ever made. So then you fall into a hole of the fact that everything seems to be connected and you can never escape the Scooby-Doo. But if you wanted to get that tiny bit of extra satisfaction, you could watch those movies. You may miss out on a tiny bit of satisfaction by not watching the series or the movies they're related to, but it's just watch what you want to watch. You'll enjoy something. I guarantee it. Anyway, this movie is good. I really enjoy a lot of the tone of the movie that it goes for, and it feels like they really want Velma to be learning lessons about emotional intelligence and friendship in this film. Because, in my opinion, Velma, as a whole, has always been the weakest character. She's not necessarily a bad character, but she doesn't ever get really good character moments in a lot of these movies. And this one, she never really gets any good character moments in that, like, she gets something epic to do, but she learns a lot, I feel like. And I think she's a better person and character for it by the end of the movie. That being said, because they're going for this, they knowingly make her kind of the worst for the vast majority of the film. I think the payoff's worth it, so I'm fine with the attitude that she has for the large percentage of the film, but it may turn off some people, and I think that's important to note before going into this movie. In addition to Velma, we get some really fun interactions between Shaggy and Scooby like we always do. Fred and the Mystery Machine, which is kind of a newer thing in the last 15 years, but I love it. And most surprisingly, Daphne and Elvira are really, really great together. Sometimes when it comes to Scooby-Doo crossover stuff, the interactions feel disingenuous and forced, but it was quite to the contrary when looking at them. It was genuine fun and very, very silly. It was probably my favorite part of the crossover stuff to do with this movie. Unfortunately for the film, the other two crossover elements don't work nearly as well. Having Scarecrow, aka Jonathan Crane from the DC Comics, is a fun little addition, and the voice talents of Dwight Schultz definitely add to it, but most of the time it just feels pretty tacked on. I don't really want to get into spoilers too much, but he didn't really need to be in the movie, and having him and Elvira in it just makes most of those scenes over-bloated. I like some of the scenes he's in early on, but overall, I think he detracts from the storyline and some of the character moments for our main crew. and I would have just preferred maybe a regular villain or more of a mystery. There are lots of different things that they could have done. I didn't really like that they went for Scarecrow, which is sad because that was one of the things that I was kind of excited about for this film. And the reason that I dislike Bill Nye in this film so much is because with Elvira and Jonathan Crane, the film already feels overbloated. So Bill Nye is in a film that already has too many crossover elements. And he takes up more screen time than either of the other two, which doesn't make sense because Bill Nye is not the first person I think of when I think of Halloween Scooby-Doo. And Bill Nye's fine as a guy, no hate to him, but his character wasn't very funny in this, and I don't enjoy most of the things that were set up by the character or around the character in this movie. He's definitely the worst part of this movie, and if they wanted to put him in a movie, they needed to give him his own spotlight. They could have done something where they go to his lab or he needs research help. That could have been some interesting stuff where Velma could meet, like, oh, this is my idol and stuff. There's some really interesting stuff they could have done, but instead they tacked him on to a movie that did not need him and actively made the film worse because of it. But the rest of the film is serviceable to good. I like the music quite a bit. The animation's pretty fun, nostalgic, some of the early stuff. There are a few scenes where the animation kind of dips in quality, but overall it's pretty fun. There's some pretty bad 3D animation, but overall I liked it. Some of the dialogue is leaning a bit into trying to capture the attention of the youth today, using like slang terms, or just trying to bring them more into the 21st century, and I think that goes directly against why I like Scooby-Doo as a franchise, which is kind of like a time capsule of like these characters envisioned in the late 60s just being in these situations where, oh yeah, we're in 2020, but we still act exactly like we were before, or we have some interesting character development, but at our core, our characters are the same. I think they tried to change a little bit too much, but it doesn't happen too often. The dialogue doesn't get too cringy a whole lot, but it is there, and I don't want that to continue in the future. But overall, it's a very fun film. It has a few big shortcomings like I spoke about earlier. I would still really recommend it to Scooby-Doo fans, and it gives me a lot of hope for the next Scooby-Doo films. I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10 just because of those issues, but I very much enjoyed myself, and I love Scooby-Doo. And if you're looking forward to more Scooby-Doo content, I am going to be releasing a ranking of every Scooby-Doo film. I just need to rewatch a couple of the ones that I haven't seen in a couple years, but since I have seen all of them, hopefully I'll get that out sooner rather than later. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Have a wonderful day.